Tata Tea Gold Power of 49, powered by Tata. Women form 49% of the world's largest democracy, and yet Indian women have a mere 11% representation in the Lok Sabha, with less than 10% women candidates in any Indian elections so far. And the result? 62% of the girls in India do not attend school. Maternal mortality ratio in India is 212 per lakh live births. One woman is raped every 21 minutes in India. A dowry death occurs every hour. To change these statistics, women must have a larger role in the electoral process. That is the aim of the Power of 49 campaign launched by Jaago in association with Network 18. The best minds came together to debate and draw up a women's manifesto to present to political parties.
Women's issues do not figure in Parliament.
This is a part of our women manifesto, opening political governance schools at the levels.
Every political party can make that promise, and when they come to power, they should deliver that.
Public safety, domestic violence, health and sanitation, education and employment. These were the issues raised. The response was overwhelming. Women across the country spoke out.
कोई प्रेग्नेंट लेडी आती है तो उसको हॉस्पिटल में एडमिट नहीं करता कि हमारे पास बेड खाली नहीं है. सरकार को जिम्मेवारी लेनी पड़ेगी.
On the rights they are denied, their needs and their aspirations. Protagonists from leading television shows reached out, encouraging women to speak up.
कौन सा उम्मीदवार हमारे मुद्दों को अपना मुद्दा बनाएगा?
मुझे मिस्ड कॉल दीजिए, अपने मुद्दे बताइए.
18 lakh women have called so far and raised their issues via the campaign IVRs. Celebrities came out in support, spurring women to step out and vote.
Power of 49.
When women vote,
Women win.
That's the power of 49.
Empower yourself.
Over 6 lakh women have pushed the pen on Jagori.com, with women's safety emerging as the biggest issue. The campaign has had a force multiplying impact through social media as well. Clearly, the Power of 49 manifesto is challenging the status quo. Power of 49. Because when women vote, women win.
Hello and welcome to the Power of 49, a Jaago initiative for the Indian woman in association with Network 18. 49% of India's electorate are women, and yet they seem to have no voice in this country, in governance, in policies, in the implementation of laws. The aim of this campaign in general election year is to change that mindset, to get women's issues on the political agenda. Over the last few weeks, we've raised issues concerning women, from public safety, domestic violence, health and sanitation, to education and empowerment. This initiative, though, is not just about raising issues, but also offering solutions given by you, the Indian woman. We now have a women's manifesto, which we are presenting to political parties across the country. The UPA government has pushed several bills on women during its 10-year tenure. It claims credit for the new rape laws, property rights and others. But despite all these claims, the fact is it couldn't pass the Women's Reservation Bill. The graph of crimes against women has been rising all the time. We put these questions and others to Kapil Sibal, Minister and Congress candidate, and gave him the Power of 49 action point list.
I want to start by asking you, Mr. Sibal, why is it so difficult for political parties to put women's issues on the mainstream, on their political agendas, despite them being 49% of the vote?
It all depends on what the issue is. Sometimes women issues have ramifications that are beyond women, right? So there you might have some complexity. But I don't think that 545 members of parliament are against taking up women's issues. If you really see the history of Parliament, and I'm talking for all political parties, whenever women's issues have come up, we've dealt with it in a non-partisan manner. For example, we were talking, there used to be dowry deaths. Parliament rose to the occasion and passed the law. We talk about rape, Parliament rose to the occasion, passed the law. Violence against women, property rights, right? Parliament rose to the occasion and passed the law. When you come to more complex issues like women's reservation, what is the extent of reservation, then it impacts not just women, it's beyond women, right? And some political parties take a very didactic position on it. And so in politics what happens is, if you have certain very important issues to pass, or legislations to pass, then you say, look, if this particular issue is going to stop Parliament from working, at least let's keep it aside for the moment till we develop a kind of consensus and get all the other issues passed. So I don't think that this question that why is it difficult for Parliament to pass women's issues is quite accurate. I think women's issues are taken very seriously, and all members of Parliament of all political parties. The problem is the mindset. You may have legislation. The point really is not that legislation is passed. The point is, even if legislation is passed, the mindset of men is such that even that legislation is not truly effective till there's a change of mindset.
But shouldn't that start right at the top? Because, as you said, the women's reservation could not be cleared. The UPA made this one of its main planks. In fact, we heard from the Congress President Sonia Gandhi when she congratulated everyone when the women's reservation bill went through the Rajya Sabha, and yet the government was not able to push it through the Lok Sabha.
Why do you say government was not able to? Parliament was not able to push it through. Because
but it is a failure of the government.
No, it's not a question of failure. There are some legislations that require consensus of Parliament. As I told you, those are beyond women's issues. Reservation is ultimately beyond women's issues. When you're talking about numbers, right? Because it impacts certain constituencies, certain political parties take a very didactic position on it. They say, okay, why just women? Why not reservation then of the backward community? That creates a problem in some other political parties.
It's part of the give and take, but I'm just looking at the UPA, at the Congress party. 4 women cabinet ministers, 9% of the cabinet was women in all. Even in the current list that we're looking at with the Congress's tickets, 15% are women's candidates. That's certainly high compared to maybe previous years, but it's still nowhere
But again, Suhasini, you must understand that ultimately this has to be a social reformation that has to take place. Women must be empowered bottom upwards. If you don't empower them bottom upwards, you're not going to have enough women on top to be considered for constituencies. Therefore, that social transformation has to take place. Don't look at legislation, dehoard social transformation. The true representation of women will happen only when there is a social reformation and transformation taking place. And that will happen through education. That will happen to social, through social reform.
All right, let's turn to the specific issues then. We polled women across the country and we found safety really the most important issue for them. And yet when we look around, 94% of the women around the country said they don't feel safe walking out. Delhi and Mumbai are in fact the most unsafe cities.
There again, it's a question of mindset.
But these are cities that are under the Congress party. The Congress party
why do you bring politics into it?
Because it is about a political accountability.
No, I disagree with you entirely. It's about societal responsibility. You see, when a young lad is walking down the street, right, the way he has been brought up at home is what his mind is when he's walking around on the street and looking at a girl, right? And if he does something, you don't blame the political party in power. You blame the family which brought him up that way.
We certainly expect safety to come from the government.
No, how can safety be brought to every home? What is the measure? Please give me an answer to that and we'll make sure that it will happen.
Are you saying there's nothing political parties and governments can do?
Did I say that? It is you're putting the entire blame on political parties. I have said it has to be a collaborative effort in which government must give the lead. And government is giving the lead. We've got laws now in force. We've got technology that is being put in place. All that is going to happen. But unless you change the mindset of people, how are you going to get that transformation?
Certainly, but there is an expectation from the government. You represent Delhi, for example. Looking back, do you think it was a mistake that the Congress party, that the government did not take a greater notice of the outrage over the Nirbhaya?
No, why? Well, we took notice. We took notice and Nirbhaya actually resulted in an act, in a legislation. I mean, this is, how can you say government did not take notice?
Because it took a while. It took a while and there was a lot of anger.
It was always takes a while. For anything that to happen takes a while. Government is equally responsible, but government is not solely responsible. I think you and I have a role to play, and that's what we must do.
And as you campaign, what would you tell people, and particularly women, if Kapil Sibal is elected again, if the UPA comes back to power, what is it
Kapil
on the
Sibal
agenda?
has always been for women. All my life, I have supported and espoused women's causes. So, in fact, sometimes I feel that I am more committed to women than women themselves.
All right. I want you to look at some of the action points that we have listed out for all our political parties, and we hope that these are something that you can take forward as well. Our action points on the Power of 49, beginning with parties leading by example, that every party commits that they will not give tickets to people who have charged with taking dowries, people who are abusers, people who are rapists.
Well, you know, point is that I cannot talk for political parties. I would say that Congress party is extremely sensitive towards these issues. And I, for one, certainly commit that my party will not, and I'm sure that my leadership will also commit to that, give tickets to people who are charged with offences of the nature that you mentioned.
All right. What about increasing percentages of women police personnel? Everyone we've spoken to says it's right now, it's about 5%.
It's an excellent idea. It's an excellent idea. But then we again need bottom upwards, movement bottom upwards, more educated women, more women opting for this. If women don't opt for this profession, how do you get more police women? So again, it requires a social transformation, right? And so this is not going to happen overnight. But I think this is the way forward.
Now, it might interest you that most women who were surveyed spoke about sanitation and health as one of their biggest issues. We're talking about a mission for 1 crore public toilets across the country. As a member of parliament, is that something that you can commit to?
I would support it fully. I would completely, I entirely agree.
But in terms of numbers, because right now we still have 600 million Indians without access to a public toilet.
Everybody must have that facility. And I think any government must be committed to that.
And finally, we come back to that issue again of women's reservations in party tickets, because it does begin from political parties.
Again, you need a social transformation for that. This is not going to happen overnight. You need women to be actually empowered. And that's happening through the panchayat. I mean, Rajiv Gandhi did this. I mean, I think the most historic steps as far as the Congress party is concerned is the 73rd and 74th Amendment of the Constitution, that we empowered women. Which political party has taken up these causes? It's only us, and we are certainly committed to it. But this representation, you can't force representation from top down unless you have adequate women fully empowered who actually participate in the process of politics, and that's key. And I think what we need to do is look out for such women and encourage women to join politics and then empower them.
That was the Congress's Kapil Sibal there, responding to our Power of 49 manifesto. As we take a short break, let's once again tell you our major manifesto points for you. Increase the percentage of women police personnel from 5% to at least 33%. GPS lighting on all buses, more metros for our cities, double the number of street lights. Public toilets, public transportation available for women and must be operational 24/7. Compulsory gender sensitization of boys from standard 5 to class 12 to counter eve teasing. Politicians must lead by example. No dowry, zero tolerance for any abusers in political parties. Full medical, legal, psychological support to the victims of violence, special family counseling centers at government buildings and police centers.
आने वाले इलेक्शंस में वोट करने से पहले मैं ये जरूर जांचूंगी कि क्या मेरे क्षेत्र के उम्मीदवार औरतों के लिए स्वच्छ और सुचारू सार्वजनिक शौचालयों का निर्माण करवाएंगे। आप भी पूरी जांच के बाद वोट करें। जागो रे 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 जागो।
Tata Tea Gold Power of 49, powered by Tata.
Welcome back once again to the Power of 49, a Jaago initiative for women in association with Network 18 in this general election year. In this election year, we are asking India's political parties to commit to empowering the Indian woman. Will the BJP implement our manifesto if they come to power? That's the question we pose to the party leadership.
Smriti Irani, National Vice President of the BJP. You've been a President of the Women's Wing as well, a Member of Parliament. Thanks so much for speaking with us on the Power of 49. Before we go further with the questioning, really, we want to hand over our Power of 49 manifesto to you. This is a manifesto that's really been put together with the voices of women around the country. We put out the word for missed calls, for people to come and push the pin online on our website, Jaago.com, and the response has been tremendous. People have written in with so many different issues, but you can see a sort of unanimity in what they're saying, essentially that they want to see women's voices on the political mainstream. So we want to hand that to you and hope that you can incorporate it in some way in the BJP's manifesto.
Well, there's definitely, I'm sure, issues here which are already a part of the BJP's agenda. I had the privilege of working with men and women in my party who are inclined towards national issues which are sometimes known as women's issues, because I've always believed that every issue is a woman's issue. It is presumed that only safety would be a woman's issue or hygiene would be a woman's issue. I think even how the country's economy is doing, what the defense sector is all about, is something women are equally interested in. So I'm sure that whatever is incorporated here is already a part of the agenda that we have outlined for the country. I'm glad that for the first time a media outlet has brought together this platform to enable women politically, and I'm glad that women actually use technology to speak their mind.
But one of the big challenges really is getting all of this into practice. I'm going to come right to it. When you were, in fact, about a year ago campaigning, you had spoken about the fact that the BJP would give 50% representation to women. They would get equal opportunities.
I had never made that statement.
I think what you said was that women will get equal opportunities in the BJP's ticket distribution. And yet when we look at the figures, it's not just the BJP, but of course particularly the BJP. No state does it cross 15%. Most places it's about 10%.
I think that if you look at the number crunch per se, we are the only party in the entire country which has actually amended our own constitution to give reservation to women within the political organization. So be it at the village level, be it the state level, district level or the national level, the entire composition of the BJP organization per se now has 33% reservation, which is something that no other political party can speak about. So while I agree that we have challenges before us, while I agree that till now I believe the number of tickets given out to women vary from 10 to 11% of the total ticket distribution, I'm also aware of the fact that given how women have performed within the political organization, given how women are inclined towards political and electoral service, I see the numbers going up.
We see the BJP, like all other national parties, when it comes to a national agenda, you have one page, one paragraph that really deals
I disagree with you completely. Firstly, because our manifesto is not yet out. Hence, for you to presume something on behalf of
We're talking about the past, but are you promising that the future will be different?
Let me just say this. I don't think one would presume that rhetoric is something that women would be satisfied with. So let me speak from past record in terms of implementation. Ladli Lakshmi Yojana is something which is spoken about now in every state, but it's the BJP that pioneered it in the state of Madhya Pradesh. Vis-a-vis women's education, one of the most decisive steps taken was in the state that I represent in Parliament, which is the state of Gujarat, where we spoke about Kanya Kelavni, which is the first 3 days of the academic year. The Chief Minister Narendra Modi, who is now the Prime Ministerial candidate, himself takes a girl child from a middle class, lower middle class or poor family to school, so that we show to society at large that we are not only investing money in the child's education, but also our own time to basically empower women and to spread the message that girl-child education is extremely important.
All right, since you brought up Gujarat, it's a state you represent and a state the BJP's prime ministerial candidate is from. We're looking at some of those figures of gender ratios, and not just at birth gender ratios, also juvenile sex ratios, the difference between numbers of boys and girls in those states. And I can tell you that even Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, Rajasthan, these are all states well below the Indian national average. These are states that have seen the BJP government. Why is it that the BJP is not able to implement its policies for girls there?
No, I would disagree with you. In fact, if you look at South Bombay, which is supposed to be the epicenter of the elite of the country, where the most educated, most enlightened people live, the highest amount of female feticide happens in South Bombay. When it comes to empowerment of women, let me cite another example. A research, interestingly, which happened from the Institute of Labour in Bonn, which found that if women own property, then those women do not face domestic violence vis-a-vis those who are salaried. And I have myself seen that in Gujarat, we propagated this whole virtue of more and more women owning property. We waived out taxes worth over 410 crores.
Let's just talk about then what the BJP plans to do. As you said, the manifesto is still to come out. We have a power of 49 action points. We put together about 20 action points, which is in the manifesto, that we hope parties are going to look more closely at. And I'm going to give you some of the highlights to begin with. Can the BJP commit to be a party that leads by example, that charge sheeters, particularly people accused of crimes against women, crimes, whether it's dowry taking, whether it's abuse of women, rape of women, those people will not be given tickets?
I have not known of a single name which has been put out right now of any man who has been charged with either raping a woman or abusing a woman or dowry death. I'm not aware of such a thing. So be rest assured that such a candidate will not be given.
What if the problems in implementation comes down really to local policing, when it comes to public safety, when it comes to domestic safety, and yet just 5% of India's police personnel are women? Is there
police reforms is something that the BJP manifesto is definitely going to speak on. There have been 1 or 2 points in which I personally contributed to, specifically with regards to a need for counsellors. So let me assure you that vis-a-vis policing, the police reform that we speak of, it's definitely a part of the BJP manifesto.
More women over there. Another big issue, and this was interesting because of all the women who wrote in and called in, health and sanitation, a big issue. 600 million Indians without access to toilets. The worst hit are really women. We have a mission that we speak about for 1 crore public toilets every year.
Ms. Suhasini, my prime ministerial candidate, Narendra Modi, has already been in controversy for propagating the fact that more and more toilets are to be built. So let me assure you that that is a target that we shall definitely meet.
All right, and finally we come to that issue of women's reservations in party tickets. We've discussed it, and yet the understanding that in Parliament, despite all these other laws being pushed through, women's reservation took a backseat.
We're the only political organization, though the Congress spent the better half of this particular government accusing the BJP of stalling Parliament, it completely forgot that when the Rajya Sabha saw the placement of the women's reservation bill, the Congress allies left the Congress party, and it's the BJP in opposition, that too particularly a male BJP leader in the name of Shri Arun Jaitley, who led the charge and actually helped pass the reservation bill in Rajya Sabha. And we have articulated on every platform possible that when the BJP comes to power, one of the first priorities is to ensure that the women's reservation bill does get passed.
That was the BJP promising us to implement the women's empowerment agenda in our Power of 49 manifesto. A reminder once again of our manifesto points. Build government workers, NGOs, local health and sanitation workers along with a combined frontline army. Build it into a combined frontline army. Our mission, 1 crore toilets within a year, separate women's toilets with privacy and 24/7 access to water. Incentivize schooling by putting in savings for girls. Transportation costs to school must be borne by the state. Need mandatory creches, women-friendly maternity policies that include long-term leave, both rural and urban. Women's reservation in party ticket distribution and in the cabinet. Those were the Power of 49 manifesto points. You too can share your views. Log on to Jaago to see what the political parties have to say about it. Time to dip into a short break. Ahead on the show, we'll see what the Aam Aadmi Party's Yogendra Yadav has to say about the Women's Power of 49 manifesto.
आने वाले इलेक्शंस में वोट करने से पहले मैं ये जरूर जांचूंगी कि क्या मेरे क्षेत्र के उम्मीदवार औरतों के लिए सुरक्षित और विशेष स्वास्थ्य सुविधाएं उपलब्ध करवाएंगे। आप भी पूरी जांच के बाद वोट कीजिए।
आने वाले इलेक्शंस में वोट करने से पहले मैं ये जरूर जांचूंगी कि मेरे क्षेत्र के उम्मीदवार पर कोई आपराधिक मामला या भ्रष्टाचार के आरोप तो नहीं है। आप भी पूरी जांच के बाद ही वोट करिए।
जागो रे 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 जागो।
Tata Tea Gold Power of 49, powered by Tata.
Welcome back to this Power of 49 manifesto in general election year. The manifesto for the Indian woman, of the Indian woman, by the Indian woman. While the Aam Aadmi Party rose to power in Delhi on the back of strong middle class support, it still hasn't told us what it will do to give women a greater share in decision making. Its party chief Arvind Kejriwal's apparent endorsement of Khap Panchayats and his law minister's Khidki village raid had upset many women's groups. We spoke to party leader, senior party leader Yogendra Yadav, who's standing from Haryana, a state with India's lowest sex ratio, to ask him about the Aam Aadmi Party's record for the Aam Aurat.
Here is the action point, Power of 49 Manifesto. We're with Yogendra Yadav of the Aam Aadmi Party. Thanks so much for joining us, Mr. Yadav. And I'd like to hand over this manifesto to you. This is a list of issues that, in fact, women from around the country have contributed to putting in. Our experts have, in fact, brought that list together and then made the action points that we want every party, in a sense, to commit to.
Thank you.
Mr. Yadav, thanks so much for joining us on this Power of 49 initiative. As we've been saying again and again, what's important for us is that women's issues make it to the mainstream of the political agenda. Is that something that you think that the Aam Aadmi Party is genuinely committed to? Because most people would say political parties just pay lip service to women.
This is one issue where politics in this country needs pressure from outside. The whole point is to make it embarrassing for political parties to continue business as usual. And this pressure can come from outside. Media plays a very important role in this, and I think you've done just the right thing. Thank you. Thanks for doing this. On commitment of my party, all I can say is we are serious. I hope we appear to be more serious than others. We are trying, we are learning. But I do think this would be one party which women in this country can relate to more than any other party.
I'm looking at the Aam Aadmi Party's manifesto. 5 pages in there for the Delhi elections, yet just one paragraph on women's issues, one on health and sanitation. And in the women's issues, you essentially spoke about the women's security force. Do you think that's enough for the manifesto? Does the Aam Aadmi Party intend to increase that amount of focus on women's issues for the national manifesto?
The one thing that we wanted to do is to make sure that women's issues do not figure only under one heading. If you look at our full manifesto, which is a 60-page document, women do not figure only on women's security. They figure under education, they figure under sanitation. In fact, public toilets was one of our main things there. They figure in other aspects as well, but I take your point. Women's issue must come in under economy. They must come under administration, they must come under education, under health. And that is our approach. The moment you start looking at politics and public agenda through women's eyes, that to me is a more effective way of looking at women's issues.
Well, you talk about the women's eyes, and certainly women were a big part of the original support for the Aam Aadmi Party. Yet, if I could take you through the Aam Aadmi Party's actual record in governance, it was 49 days. But the fact is, this women's security force never got underway. The commitment to health and sanitation and more public toilets never got underway. Don't you think women's issues should have had a bigger focus, given how many women came out to support you?
Suhasini, 49 days is not a time where you can deliver on infrastructural things. In our manifesto, we had clearly distinguished between two sets of things. Those we hope to deliver within 100 days, and for those we had asked for more time. Now, these are two issues you would agree you can't do them in 100 days. All we can say is, at least on women's voluntary force, we started the process. On public toilets, budget would have been the first place to do it, but we never got to that stage. So, to my mind, it may be a tad unfair to judge our commitment on women based on these 49 days where we did not even get to present a budget for this.
What is it that we can expect from the Aam Aadmi Party when it comes to this national manifesto?
A, that Aam Aadmi Party would talk about women's concerns not only under a label called women's issues, but everywhere. B, that Aam Aadmi Party would take women's representation more seriously than other parties. That Aam Aadmi Party would open its door for talent that comes from the pool called women.
If I could come back to the Aam Aadmi Party government's record, one of the incidents it was most famous for or notorious for was for the Khidki raid. We saw the law minister of the Aam Aadmi Party actually coming out and telling the police effectively to raid the house of a woman despite not having a warrant. Now, the facts may be under doubt, and of course you have spoken about the CCTV footage there, but the question, that doesn't really inspire confidence that the Aam Aadmi Party actually cares about women?
Please don't see this as pro-women, anti-women, because on both sides there were women. Among victims of one kind, which is African women, these are women, victims of the other kind, those women who live in that locality, who were actually behind all those petitions which were coming. So there are women on both sides. All I was trying to say was that to see this as a question where, you know, it was anti-women or there was some racism involved. These are not fair ways of looking at it. You could of course say that the minister was probably not acting in ways which were correct, procedurally correct. Those are things we need to go into. But this would be unfair to see this as anti-woman issue. Yes, in one respect, one of the victims was women who you could say we did not pay enough attention to. The impression that went out to lots of progressive men and women was that we were somehow trying to defend someone who had done something terribly anti-women. That is something which we could not convey properly. To my mind, the facts of the case, and I went to Khirki, I spoke to women there, women of both sides, I went and spoke to that. I do not think it was a question of women as victims and men trying to do something to them.
Let's turn now to the election that is in front of you. From Gurgaon, you are standing for the Lok Sabha seat. Haryana is actually India's state with the lowest sex ratio, 877 women per 1,000 men, when the country's average is actually at about 940. What do you plan to do about that?
It's shocking, it's abysmal, something needs to be done, and it is possible to do it. You know, earlier the economists saw it, earlier the demographers saw it, the feminists saw it. Now men in Haryana's villages see it. And why do they see it? Because there are no brides. Because in every village now, in my constituency, every village there are unmarried men, unmarried boys. They are actually paying. The dowry has been reversed. So it's such a strange, weird situation that the whole society now has to react. So this issue can and should be raised in politics. We plan to raise it. We have actually pretty strict laws by now. There are some questions about implementation of laws. Even implementation, even in Haryana, is pretty strict now. I should say that. The problem is the mindset that needs to change. A lot of work needs to be done.
I'm glad you bring up the mindset issue, because one of the other statements of the Aam Aadmi Party's leadership has really been about Khap Panchayats. And this is a mindset issue. Do you support the ruling of Khap Panchayats? This is not just a parallel legal system in India. This is an all-male system, and its verdicts are often skewed against women.
Every single caste community in this country has their own panchayats of some sort. As long as they do dispute resolution through consensus, and too many cases do not end up in court of law, it is permissible, it is welcome. However, if there is any coercion being used, if there is any violation of law, and if there is any justification for heinous things like murders, this is completely unacceptable.
Mr. Yadav, here on the Power of 49, we have action points on absolutely every issue that women have been concerned about. But we brought to you certain action points that we think need to be highlighted more than any other. I'd like to get your response to them. Also, if there is a commitment from the Aam Aadmi Party on these issues, to begin with, that parties must lead by example, that there will be zero tolerance in the Aam Aadmi Party, whether it comes to dowry takers, whether it comes to people who have been charged with the abuse of women or children, being given any kind of party positions or tickets.
I think I can claim that Aam Aadmi Party is the only party in this country which has actually done that. In Delhi, we had given ticket to a candidate and the last date of nomination was over. After that, we received a complaint that there was a domestic violence case. We looked at that, and yes, indeed, there was a case. The case was not even tried yet. Just on that basis, we actually went public. We said we are withdrawing the ticket. We apologized to the public. I thought this was one of the few instances in Indian public life that any political party did that. And I can assure you, any one complaint on these three counts, corruption, criminality, or actions of this kind, which are not quite criminal sometimes, but what is called character, All these three will not be tolerated. We have given a public commitment that we would withdraw the tickets if any of these three can be proved.
All right, our next action point is about the increase of women police personnel. Certainly women don't come under, it's not a state subject yet, but when you look at the numbers of the gender imbalance, a mere 5% is the national figure of women in the police forces. Is there a commitment from the Aam Aadmi Party, if they have a role at the national level, to take that up to a higher, even 33%?
Absolutely no reason why more and more women cannot be in the police force or cannot be officers. We have now seen some leading examples, which are fantastic examples. So yes, there should be a national consensus, and I think on this question there can be national consensus. This is not one of those questions which actually would face a serious blockade from other political parties either.
On health and sanitation, the Aam Aadmi Party made a commitment, didn't go forward with it. You said you didn't have enough time. But here on the Power of 49, we're talking about Mission 1 crore public toilets. There are 600 million, 60 crore people out there without access to a toilet. We're talking about a mission for 1 crore public toilets. Is that something that you think is workable?
This is a very serious issue, especially for rural women. You know, we don't realize, apart from public toilets, also private toilets is an issue. And so many of disease among Indian women is actually connected to lack of access to toilets. So not just public toilets, but also support for creating private toilets. All this is required all over the country, and we would happily commit to this number.
And finally, is that age-old question of women's representation right at the top, not just in offices, not just in the public or private sector, but there in Parliament as well. One step towards getting more women into Parliament and into public office is certainly for parties to include them on their ticket. And yet we're looking at the Aam Aadmi Party figures, the latest one, 242 tickets announced so far, only 29 women.
That's a little more than 10%. I could take two views on it. I could say, well, that's probably more than the last parliament had. I could say that's probably more than other parties are going to do. But that's no answer. I think we should compare this not with what others are doing, but what should be the case. To my mind, something like 20 to 25% is the minimum critical mass. Unless that happens, there would be not enough of a pressure group in the Lok Sabha. So we need to do better. My party hasn't come up to my own expectations, and not because anyone is conspiring or anything, but because we have set a more difficult route for ourselves. For other parties, it's very easy to show women's quota by simply having Bahu Betis. Our party says no relatives. Our party says only one person from one family. So we have set more difficult target for ourselves. We have done much less than what we wanted to, but believe me, Suhasini, every time we set for ticket distribution and thinking about every single case, we've asked this question: is there a woman there? Has someone applied? We have actually appealed to women from
looking media. Affirmatively.
We've said, please apply.
Okay, that was the Aam Aadmi Party's Yogendra Yadav speaking on the Power of 49 Manifesto. As we've been saying over the past few weeks, women across the country have raised their issues on this platform. Today we've taken these issues to some of the most influential politicians of their parties to ensure that every party implements our Women's Manifesto. Right through this election campaign, we will keep reminding these parties of the need to implement your 10-point manifesto. Log on to Jaago.com to see what our political parties have to say about it. Exert the power of 49. Vote for the political candidate who's ready to address women's issues. Remember to cast an informed and independent vote in this coming election. Join us on the Power of 49, because when women vote, women win. Thanks very much for watching. Goodbye.
आने वाले इलेक्शंस में वोट करने से पहले मैं जरूर जांचूंगी कि मेरे क्षेत्र के उम्मीदवार बच्चियों और औरतों की शिक्षा की स्थिति में कैसे सुधार लाएंगे। आप भी पूरी जांच के बाद ही वोट कीजिए।
आने वाले इलेक्शंस में वोट करने से पहले मैं ये जरूर जांचूंगी कि क्या मेरे क्षेत्र के उम्मीदवार औरतों को सुरक्षित सड़कें और सार्वजनिक यातायात प्रदान करने के लिए कार्य करेंगे। आप भी पूरी जांच के बाद ही वोट कीजिए।
जागो रे जागो रे जागो रे जागो रे जागो रे।